late, about 10 minutes possibly. So just add that to our apologies, please, Sandra. Malcolm Welsh should be joining the meeting a little late. And can we get the apologies formally read, please, Sandra?
Yes, formally we've had Georgina Connolly, who will not be able to log in this morning or today, and currently that's the only formal one we've had so far.
Good. Can we have someone move to accept those apologies, please?
An apology, sorry, and Willie did also advise of Virginia,
Okay.
who will help with us this morning.
Please note the addition of Virginia Warren into that. Is that okay, Greg? Move Greg Sayers, seconded Amy McDonald. All those in favour, please say aye or indicate. Okay. Any objections? Any abstentions? That's carried. And now moving to declaration or declarations of interest, and just remind people that it is a requirement of the Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee to check on that monthly and regularly, and please advise Sandra Harris of that. Turning to page 4 of our meeting papers, please. Minutes for confirmation, 13th of June. Do we have someone move and second those minutes, please? Moved by Penny Smart. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Cherie Povey. All those in favour, please say aye. Any abstentions? Any objections? Okay, that's carried. And going to page 9 of those same minutes, the action list that the Joint Committee action tracker be received. Have a mover for that, please. Greg Sayers, a seconder.
Second, Chair, that's Josh, thanks.
Yeah, okay, there's Jocelyn. All those in favour, please indicate. Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Okay, that's carried. Moving to page 12, the forward work plan. That the motion is to receive the indicative forward work plan. Let's mover for that, please. Receive the forward work plan on page 12. Moved Penny Smart. We have a seconder. Jane Sherrod. Indication, please, those in favour. Any objections? Any abstentions? That's carried. So we move to agenda item 6.1, the preliminary year 2 results, and we're going to call on Justine and Stephanie, and the report is to provides a summary of the unaudited year 2 year-end results for the Joint Committee's information in advance of any external communications. So the first, there's 4 resolutions attached to this agenda item, and if we can have the first one, please, that we received, or the Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee received that report. Have someone move in that direction, please. moved by Jane, seconded by Greg. All those in favour, please indicate. Aye. Any objections? Any abstentions? Thank you. We'll pass it over to Justine and Stephanie. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou katoa. It's fantastic to have this paper here. A key part of today will be bringing the Joint Committee up to speed on progress. Unfortunately, Stephanie Versteeg is unwell today, so I'm home alone. Be gentle. But look, this is an important paper for yourselves, just to see and understand the performance of KMR since over year 2. So just a reminder, it's 21 months since the MOU was signed and about 7 months since the Mōrikura established. These results are preliminary, which means that they are not audited yet and are still subject to both verification and audit process and may therefore still change. But we felt it was important not only to update the Joint Committee on performance in year 2, the first full year, if you like, of KMR's operations, but also to make sure that you were aware as we head into a conversation with our investors, our contractors in the Ministry for the Environment. So in brief, I'm really pleased with these results. We met most of the KPIs. It's a lot of hard work by our landowners, by the Mōrikura, by our many delivery partners. I just want to acknowledge that. Also, thank you to the Joint Committee for your support. In terms of the performance metrics, just to remind ourselves, these have come from our annual work plan for year 2, which was signed off 15 months previously, so in year 1. We've met the targets for the number of sediment reduction plans or equivalent that were delivered in year 2. We've met the targets for the area of land covered by those plans. We've met the targets for fencing, which I worked out this morning is actually more than fencing from Whangarei to Auckland. So I thought that was quite a nice thing to have in mind. How long is 238 kilometres of fencing? Obviously, it doesn't go from Whangarei to Auckland, but it is still a long, long way. And we met for now, we've met the Jobs for Nature employment and statistics. We didn't have a target for that, but we were looking at baseline metrics and there's some good delivery around funding into local economies, local communities there. And as you'll see, we're also tracking our training metrics. Planting was the area we did not meet the target. We were just over half of, or a little more than half of the metric for the year. And just to discuss that, we're still really happy with that result in terms of getting plants in the ground or committed from landowners to be in the ground over this winter. And you will recall that we have a winter or a foundation planting campaign to really drive that upwards from January. We were aware there was some lag in planting commitments. One thing to be aware of here is generally in the program, we are seeing more fencing than planting at this point, and we will be having further campaigns, if you like, marketing and engagement campaigns to support the ongoing planting. That's really necessary and it will support our local nurseries. But I think at the minute what we are seeing is the regulatory drivers around fencing. Planting is a voluntary activity. We are seeing that play into the choices that landowners are making in this voluntary program. So I might pause there and just acknowledge that we have had a number of headwinds. I think we've managed them as well as we might have been able to manage them. These are headwinds that affect all operational programs, but particularly for KMR, which spans Northland and Auckland. There were some particular headwinds there in respect of the border closures last year for close to 5 months, but also some of our supply chain disruptions. And I'm really pleased. I just want to acknowledge the team at this point. So I'll pause there and just see if there's any questions or comments from yourselves. Thank you.
I have a quick question, Tame, if that's all right.
Sorry, I missed that.
I've just got a quick question, Tame. It's Penny here.
Yeah, by all means, go for it.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Justine, you mentioned the more fencing than planting. Is there, will there, I'm hoping that with the fencing, they'll be planting within that fencing next year?
Yes, there is a cunning plan for marketing and campaigning that we will be initiating. I think we are going to see some pretty regular coming into summer and coming into winter campaigns to drive that up. And we are in close contact with the nurseries to lift that. But you're absolutely right. In theory, the planting comes after the fencing, and we would expect an uplift this year. We also know with Whenua Whānau Fund applications, of which I think we've approved a couple now, we do tend to see more planting. However, in our quarterly update with Fonterra, we have also been apprised that many of the dairying landowners at this point are focusing on fencing and may not be able to focus on planting in year 2. And we are working quite closely with our Fonterra delivery partner to make sure that all the opportunities to plant are provided, are made available. As we come into a partnership with Beef and Lamb New Zealand too, we will also focus on fencing and planting, not just fencing. I see Jane has your hand up.
Kia ora, Justine, through the chair. Just wondering, the koriola that you're having with Sarah around the southern Kaipara River, what is our ability to be also engaging with non-farming landowners? And I point to NZ Rail and several of the industrial that have impacted on the Kaipara River coming through post Kaupapa, because when it goes through, you've also got the Auckland Council on the other side as well. Are we having those discussions with them so we can assist, so they can assist us with some of the things that they're currently not doing, because it's impacting on the Kaipara River?
Kia ora, Jane. Look, I'm not aware of what specific engagements are in that area, but I would be very keen to understand a little more from yourself about the context, and I make a commitment that we will be in touch to understand and to make available, inform people around the KMR program opportunities. There is a potentially very large project that may come in that catchment soon, and KMR has been involved in some early discussions around very significant planting, but I'm unsure if that relates to the context that you have, Jane, so perhaps we could touch base later. Yeah, kia ora.
I'm kia ora. Justine, I'm just asking that question from, we've got our old photos of where tupuna were at on the other side of the Kaipara River. So you've got this side of the township side, but it's the other side that is impacting on the sedimentation. So kia ora. Good to have a conversation with you on that. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora, Jane. I look forward to that. Thank you for putting that on the table.
Any further questions?
Thank you. Does our new settlement highlight the importance of our coastal area?
No further questions? Is your hand still up, Jane, or is that from your last?
I'm just removing it, Tame.
Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, can we have a mover and a seconder for resolutions 2 through to 4 on item 6.1?
Well done.
Is that you, Jane?
Yes, I.
Jane, moved by Jane, seconder. Seconder Penny Smart. Indication, please. All those in favour, please say or indicate.
Aye.
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 Aye. Kia ora.
Any objections? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you very much, Justine and the team at Kaipara Māori Kura.
Aye. Kia ora through the chair. Tautoko the sentiments of Penny as well, and yourself.
Look forward to similar glowing reports from the Ministry for the Environment. Thank you. Kia ora tata. All right, moving on to agenda item 6.2 and conflict of interest management around grants. It's on page 17 of our meeting papers, and I'd like to pass the time over to before passing over to Ben Hope to lead us out on this. It sets out the requirements of the local authorities Members Interest Act legislation and some info on how KMR is implementing its interim measures. So just before we move into that, someone move that we receive the report by Ben Hope, please. Move in a second for receiving it. Kia ora, Jocelyn. Moved by Jocelyn, seconder. Amy McDonald. All those in favour, please say aye or indicate.
Aye. Aye.
Kia ora. And any objections? Any abstentions? And
Yeah, kia ora, Tane.
Kia
Penny here. Sorry, I need to declare a conflict of interest, please. I won't be taking part in this discussion.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you.
And for those that haven't noted the incoming chat, David Cochrane will be joining us shortly, and perhaps Ben can give us an indication of when he's likely to contribute. Oh, he's here now. Very good. Okay. Okay, so we are now moving to over to you, Ben.
Great, thank you very much. David, I'll allow David to introduce himself once I've sort of run through the intro part of the paper. So I'll take the paper as read, but I'll highlight a few of the key points in it. So we did a bit of research and discussion after our last meeting. The fact that we looked at a few of the other granting authorities and looked at advice from the Office of the Auditor General and some specific legal advice. The fact that we're an open application process so that the criteria is public and effectively, as long as you meet the criteria, you can get the funding, works in the favour of the program, and there's no exclusion-based decisions made at that joint committee level, which is also quite helpful. The LAMIA Local Authorities Members Interest Act legislation limits the financial threshold for a sitting member as an application in a given year. That's baked in and we can't change that at this stage. There are obvious intricacies when you read through the paper when it comes to the definition of land ownership and also the definition when it comes to related parties. The safest thing is to declare it early, and then the Māori Kura team through Justine can work through the framework we've provided to ensure that we're clear on any potential conflicts and that they're addressed. But the thing is, we need to be made early, at the earliest point of either an expression of interest or an application, that there may be something potentially declarable, and then we can work through it. The interim position we've got and provided for in the paper around the granting process just sort of keeps everyone safe around the financial matters, given the public aspect of the funding we're using. And we'll look to explore our options with the Office of the Auditor General and report back on what the possible next steps are moving forward. There is as noted in the paper, the possibility of exemptions, but those need to be worked through. So that's kind of the sort of highlight for it. I'm open to any questions, anything specifically David may be able to help with. Are there any questions or comments?
Sorry, David, you're on mute.
Right, so I'm from Wellington. I'm here to help you. So I've got that out of the way. One thing we might perhaps talk about is the possible application under Section 3, Ben, is it, to the Auditor General for clearance, should we need it.
Yeah, so under Section 3, we can apply to the Office of the Auditor General to look for an exemption should we need it. So depending on where applications get to, we would look to talk to the OAG about either a overarching or on an individual basis. That sort of needs to be worked through, and we would report back to the committee on where that process is and what the OAG needs from us.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to get a general one. And so there's a question about whether we should wait till we've got a specific case.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to think that although it might be difficult to get a general one, it wouldn't hurt to start the conversation with them and let them know that we're a very unusual body because we're actually local government dealing with central government money. And this rule wouldn't apply to central government. And there are a lot of other points that we can make as well, but I think it's something you might want to just keep in mind. Perhaps work that through, work out what we would say anyway. And just generally on conflicts and things, don't get too hung up about the technical wording of 15% of a company like this. They're just deeming provisions. If you look like you're conflicted, you feel like you're conflicted, you probably are. And by far the safest thing to do is declare it. If your colleagues say, no, that doesn't count, or you, after a bit of advice, you're convinced it doesn't matter, that's fine. But declare the conflict, don't participate, don't vote, and ideally, and some occasionally, to what you might do to the quorum, get out of the room. It's just too, although the law doesn't say that, practicalities are that if someone has to write down what happened, well, Johnny raised his eyebrows and frowned when something or other happened, and suddenly you look like you're participating. Participating doesn't just mean talking. And if you want to stay in the room, ask yourself really hard why. Why do you want to stay there while something in which you've got an interest is disclosed? Isn't it better to just clear off and expect everyone else to do the same when their turn comes? Because it all comes. There's nothing wrong with a conflict. Conflicts happen all the time. Very common. What matters is that you deal with them properly. Thanks, mate.
Any comments from the members? Kia ora, Jocelyn.
Kia ora, Tommy, thank you. Just one quick comment. I very much support David's recommendation in terms of opening a conversation at this point with the Office of the Auditor General. I think we are in a position to be able to emphasise the uniqueness of this particular entity, but also it is potentially a model for where governance may well be heading across the changes to the Resource Management Act legislation as well. So I think there's definitely a conversation to be had, and it will also stand in good stead that we as an organisation and as a governance body are very aware of the potentials for conflicts of interest and our unique situation with the way that our governance structure is set up. And to be having that conversation and willing to open that conversation shows those who are following us in the work of KMR that we're really open about this whole potential issue and the risks that it could provide and the potential for how we would be perceived within our communities. And I think that is the most important factor with having that conversation at this point in time. So I fully support the recommendations to actually open that conversation with the Office of the Auditor General at this point in the equation. So yeah, just wanted to wholeheartedly endorse that, really.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Any comments from the early members? Kia ora, Jane. We're lip reading at the moment.
There we go. Kia ora anō. The consideration, the first consideration of the recommendations, looking at the advice of how you engage with Kaipara Uri representatives, because we were appointed by obviously our own entities. And so I'm glad that that was flagged. The thing that I'd really want it to be a instead of considering, that there is some sort of directive in play, acknowledging, much like the difference of directives and simply just taken into account, of the RMA, rather to have a directive acknowledgement of our representation and of our processes, and putting it up there that seemingly already the council has all the power, so to speak, if you want to call it that way, and we are acknowledging that we're under the Local Government Act, but we're actually going over here. So we are, in that terms, we're really unique. And how do we progress that forward? If I consider that if it is a directive to do so, then it acknowledges the tiriti, it acknowledges our placement, it acknowledges that you're talking to Ngāti Whātua in this aspect, as is now, and that's the placement of it. On top of, we're obviously looking at progressing through the negotiations body as well. So it understands there is a uniqueness, nuance there, and it knows that it's got to do something about it, but to place us underneath Crown or local government still has us placed in that arena, whereas we have an opportunity to create an arena in the proper sense of te rite. Kia ora.
Can I just double check? Can I just double check, Jane? And the rest of the Kaipara Uri members on the joint committee, where we're heading to with this joint committee, David, I'm not sure whether you've seen the intricate wiring diagrams, I'll call them. It's quite complex in that the KMR as a remediation program is part of a treaty settlement negotiation with the Crown. Ultimately, the legislation that would set the Kaipara Moana body, ultimately that will be through a deed of settlement, through a deed of treaty settlement. And so with that comes expectations of Crown provisions through that deed of settlement. And I guess the point that has to be articulated is that we must surely cover off the issues that we've raised so far. That some of us are shareholders in some substantial blocks of land. The shareholding may not be substantial, but the area and the relativity of the area in those land blocks to the Kaipara Moana remediation is major. I mean, the largest incorporated block of Maori interests is in Otakaniti. And if you're not a part of the shareholding, well, you must be of the third tier family. So those in royal settings have a high level of treaty, sorry, of land interest in there. And I guess by design, we're not, we didn't invest in those land blocks. We didn't go out and buy them on the open market. So I guess the angle that we're trying to ensure is that it is covered off at the Crown's end. It should not be incumbent upon us to prove who we are when we've laid out a whole historical account to the Crown. We've set out the reasons behind seeking Crown intervention in the decline of the Kaipara Moana, but as a consequence of that, we have come to this point around how do we manage these interests that we have in as far remote as they could possibly be, or as close as they could possibly be. And there are instances like that throughout the catchment, David. And I guess having the Office of the Auditor General online and aware of that is as you've said, open the conversation, alert them to this, so as we're not, because to make any changes to that regulation or to that deed of settlement will require an act of parliament or a change to parliamentary legislation. And that's a little bit more complex than writing a submission in defense of yourself. Kia ora.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Kia ora,
Tom.
kia ora.
It is difficult, and I was thinking one of the things we were saying to the Auditor General was not only that the land wasn't commercially purchased or anything like that, it was also unlikely to be ever disposed of. That the owners are more stewards for the time being than people who are looking around to try and flog it off. I mean, small bits might perhaps be taken to straighten a road or something, but generally the land is not a profit making. The profits may be made from the land, but the land itself is not in the market. So if a grant improves the value of the land, that's nice, but it doesn't put dollars in anyone's pocket.
Very good. Thank you, David. Any further comments from any of the members? Kia ora, Jane,
Kia ora.
your hand is still up.
I know, just agree with the kōrero that you have just shared with us, Tame, which is why I'm seeking for it to be more directive rather than a procedural aspect under local government. So, kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Jane. If there are no more questions, and really look forward to any of the responses from particularly, Office of the Auditor General, David and Ben, but we really appreciate the effort to set this out and prepare a bit of a plan. If there are no further discussions, can I have someone move resolutions 2 through to 5 on agenda item 6.2? Kia ora, Jocelyn. Do you have a seconder? Kia ora, Amy. Moved by Jocelyn, seconded by Amy. All those in favour, please give an indication. Aye.
Aye. Kia ora.
Okay. Any objections? Any abstentions? Thank you very much indeed. We've got 15 minutes. We're 15 minutes ahead. Sorry, Justine has just posted a note here about making sure it's added in the minutes that it's a amend the agree in the recommendation to direct. Okay, got that, Ben, Sandra? Thank you very much. Thank you, Justine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate your inputs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll sign off now. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got 20 minutes to morning tea at 10:35, and our next agenda items are both longish. So are there short, quick matters? Justine, you want to have your Potataki update?
Yes, I'm very happy to do that. I can't raise Sarah Nolan. I was wondering if she could go earlier, but she's booked in for a particular meeting. So I'm happy to take the Potataki report now, if that's helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So this is really an update. We've had the year 2 year-end results. This is a more, if you like, programmatic view of the last 6 weeks of KMR program activity. A couple of things just to acknowledge there, and for those of you not in the workshop last month, we ran through the recent engagement, including with communities, primary sector, and even hapu groups. So we haven't repeated that in the Potataki report, but I would like to speak to our ongoing uplift in engagement, not only to drive sediment reduction planning, but also to raise awareness of KMR, the program, including in respect of the jobs aspect of the Jobs for Nature investment. And as you'll have seen, we've run in the last 6 weeks, we've run a further or fourth wānanga, 4-day wānanga training course that was particularly focused on Tororo and Namonga Whakahi tangata whenua to bring them into the trained and ideally contracted to KMR space to deliver sediment reduction plans as kaitiaki, but also working with other landowners. That's an ongoing focus for us, and we have planned as well some commitments for 1-day introductory hui on KMR and its kaupapa. That will be rolled out in time once we have capacity to do that. And as it's looking better now to go on to marae because of Omicron safety factors, we've held that off, but the time looks like it's coming here in the next month or two to re-engage. And I know that Matua Willie has also been working very hard, as discussed in the workshop, to engage. We'll hear from him and Fiona Kemp later around progress in the Kororo Tukuiho space. Just really wanted to call out and speak to one area that's not on track, and that is the workforce area, workforce development area. We spoke about that at the workshop for those not involved in that discussion. It is an area where we have some more work to do. I've been recruiting to fill the workforce development role in the Mōrikura. I'm close to making an offer to a very, very good candidate who comes from that sector and is very, very well skilled and has a very sound focus on working closely with iwi and Māori groups, hapu groups. There'll be a workshop in September to work through with the Joint Committee how we're thinking about the workforce development work program, how progress to date, and also what our KMR focus needs to be to, if you like, deliver on our 4 investment outcomes while managing sediment as a key focus. We'll also have MSD in the room for that discussion, so as they have a broader mandate and perhaps some different perspectives that we'll want to work through. But generally speaking, I'm very pleased with the performance and delivery in these 6 work program areas. What you'll see is I'm also starting to assess now whether the program areas are on track against our annual work program. From 1 July, we have a much more systematised way of running the process. Digital tools, some small slippage there. Sarah's just joined us, that's wonderful. Some small slippage in the digital tools area, but not material to the outcomes and work plan progress that we need. We'll keep a close eye. We have 2 new bodies that are now program and project managing that, including a strategic oversight group. But other than that, I'm happy to take questions or comments on that Potataki report. Kia ora.
Good. Thank you, Justine. Any comments from any of the members? Any questions? So how many thousand acres did you get out of Te Roro?
That's in a lovely CRM and a spreadsheet, so someone else will have to dive into that. But look, you know, we are starting to see that scale up, and it's good. It's on track. I know we have a lot more to do, so I'm not overstating the progress there, but it is coming along, and we are definitely working with others and trying to work. We realise there's some things in the Whenua Whānui Fund that are still to be worked through, and we are working on that now. In particular, how to front load the payments for that contract type in line with joint committee decisions back in September. I see.
Yeah, that's great news, Justine. Just a comment, really. I trust the MSD response is not any grandstanding based on a sort of decade reduction, the lowest rate of Māori unemployment, as they were blasting about it on Māori television yesterday morning. That it's the lowest it's been for the last 10 years. Whether that's resulted in this sitting back on their laurels a little. And, you know, I must say, I've been a little bit sort of bemused at what happened between our hui at Parakai, where we were presented with a whole lot of direction and opportunities and options of workforce development, and to now. But it's just an observation that you know, if there's any sort of hint that there's a relaxation or a downgrading of workforce development type effort, I think we need to know, because it may be in hospitality or pouring white coffees or lattes or something, but it's certainly, or you know, in places like Queenstown, but certainly not out in the rural sector.
Kia ora, Tame, if I may, through the chair, just comment a little on this, just to give a sense of that. I cannot speak for MSD, but what I can say is that as with many things in KMR, we are almost needing to go back to the foundations to look at whether the building blocks that we thought were in place are in place, and what is the role of KMR in a big system, in a system that has many actors, many players, many people taking action. And as you'll hear next month, we have aspirations for sustained nature-based employment over generations. And we are really working in that space of the settlement plans to enable that. We are about to sign a memorandum of understanding with the New Zealand Association of Resource Managers, which will help invest in the core business of KMR to build not only the basic capability to train and develop and have that training recognised as a qualification, but then take those who are ready into more technical training. And there's a piece of work around how we would work through the environmental arms of the Kaipara Uri to bring on, if you like, those not yet in employment or those in intermittent employment. And it's far more than just taking people off MSD books, in my view. This is about supporting, providing pastoral care, working through the many opportunities, including funding ones to support those who are if you like, backing often our young rangatahi to come into nature-based employment. And I think KMR can be a catalyst or a broker for that activity. We won't solve all the problems of the universe, but where we can stick to our swim lane and do that well, that's really where I think the focus needs to be. MSD will have a much broader kaupapa, if you like, and interest that they can take off. That said, I think there still remains some excellent opportunities where there is an overlap of KMR and MSD interests, and I can see that working quite well. So next month we will look to bring our perspectives, that's our KMR perspectives, to the table, and invite MSD also to present their perspectives, and ideally test and refine our proposed view of where that overlap is. And it may look a little different from the workforce development strategy that was signed off many months ago by the Joint Committee, which probably did assume that a lot of the foundational building blocks were there, and that there was an opportunity to take perhaps faster on an accelerated basis into that more technical space. So I think we have a clearish view now coming forward, and we would like to test that together with yourselves next month. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Justine. Malcolm, tēnā koe, Malcolm Welch.
Kia ora, Tami. Yeah, apologies again for my late arrival. Probably just declaring a conflict, another conflict, MSD. Yeah, so my wife's the regional director. So just declaring that. And then probably within my MPI role, I'm working with MSD as well, and trying to align to KMR through one of our programs. So just probably declaring those points. Kia ora.
Thank you, Malcolm. Any comments from the members? I'd like to make a comment that for all the intents and purposes of Kaipara Uri entities, they have the structure, the outreach or the reach to their respective members. They have the legislation that supports them to be able to do a whole range of activities. Kaipara Moana remediation will not solve their overall strategies and objectives. So I am suggesting to the Joint Committee that as long as it's within the context of the Kaipara Moana remediation program, and it's connected to plants in the ground and fences erected in the name of sediment reduction. That's how the program sits at the moment. We're not there to solve last century's grievances about social policy management or implementation. No. That's not our role. That's a debate and a discussion that should happen at that Kaipara Uri entity table, not at our table. And I think it's important that our work is maintained in those lanes. And like Malcolm has already pointed to, there are a number of alignments we could be making, but our wiring is not the same as what the Kaipara Uri entities is in terms of legislation, regulation, what you can and can't do. Kia ora. I raise this in all due respects to the matter being raised with Kaipara Maurikura, but Kaipara Moana remediation was never designed to populate marae with nurseries. And I've seen this referred to in documents of the Kaipara Uri entities. How many nurseries are there on our marae? How many of our marae are engaged in Kaipara Moana programs? Kaipara Moana remediation programs. Now, that's not the objective of Kaipara Moana remediation. That's not the objective of the MOU that was signed, the deed of funding that we've agreed to. Now, we don't want to get tangled up in what's the word? Well, Donald Trump used it anyway. Yeah, we mustn't get tangled up in that kind of reporting. Kia ora. Malcolm, I see your hand still up.
Oh, yeah, no, kia ora, Tami. I just want to come in on the back of your kōrero there, and it's probably a general comment that I'm often thinking, are we getting too broad in what we're trying to achieve, and perhaps losing our specific focus a little. And absolutely, tautoko everything you've said. You know, the alignment is critical, and yes, but perhaps we shouldn't be driving it. We should be supporting that. And it's just a comment I want to make to the committee. Yeah, we can't be all things to all people, and I just want to make sure we're keeping our focus and our point of purpose. Kia ora.
Oh, geez. Thank you very much, Justine. There are no further comments or questions from the members. It's just gone 10:31, and we are scheduled to have a half-hour interlude and check back in at 11 a.m. Thank you, one and all. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Georgina. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry. Yeah, we're just on a morning tea at the moment.
Oh, that's okay. I thought I did see that you had a break, but I couldn't hear anyone. So I thought perhaps my end was not linked in properly.
Yeah.
How's everyone?
I think we're all doing well. Thank you.
Well, that's awesome.
Are you in nicer weather over there?
Yeah, it's really hot. I don't know what time it is. I think it's about 6:30 or something, but in the morning, and it feels like you've just walked into a sauna. It's so warm.
Yeah.
But it's lovely. It's been a long day. Yesterday was a long day. All day travel. No sleep.
Oh no.
No sleep the day before because you're busy cleaning your house because all of a sudden you need to clean windows, eh?
Oh, it's good to see that you managed to come in on the hui anyway.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go on mute.
Okay.
Wait till what else comes up. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Kia ora tātou. I see a interlude screen is still up. Looks like sunset or yellow sky. Yeah, sunset, eh? Or red skies at sunset. Oh, here we go. Oh, we're still alive. Okay. Trust everyone is all connected back and pick up our agenda at where are we? Item 6.3, the Payaka report from Sarah Nolan, it's technical specialist. Someone moved that and second that the report Te Payaka preliminary results by Sarah Nolan, technical specialist advice, and dated 9th of August be received. Moved by Penny Smart. Do we have a seconder?
I'm happy to second. Tammy. It's Georgina.
Oh, kia ora, Georgina. Thank you.
Sure.
Moved by Penny Smart, seconded by Georgina Curtis, that we received the report by Sarah Nolan. All those in favour, please indicate.
Aye, kia ora.
Any objections? Any abstentions? We pass the time over to you, Sarah. Kia ora.
Kia ora tāne. Kia ora koutou, ko Sarah Nolan tuku ingoa. I think I know a few of you, but I'm from Healthy Waters in Auckland Council. And I was seconded into KMR for a lovely 11 months, but that ended up end of June this year. But yeah, it's awesome to be here and to finally be able to present Te Payaka. We've been going through this now pre-KMR. Actually, it's been going on since 2018. So to have results to be able to share, it's pretty exciting. So I'll just bring up the presentation. Can everyone see this? Awesome. So yeah, I am here to talk to you about Te Payaka, so the Native Root Project. We have the preliminary results. We are still waiting on the finalised report. So some of the things I have shared with you and we'll talk about today, they are true, they are factual, but there will be a bit more information coming and hopefully a bit more comms styled because it is pretty technical. So kind of getting into it, as we know, erosion and fine-grained sediment going into the Kaipara Moana is what we're trying to reduce. And stream bank erosion studies have found contributes at least 50% of it. I do a lot of my work in the hotio with some of the people on the call here, And we found in the Hōtio catchment that's up to 72% of the sediment is sourced from the stream banks. So we really need to be able to look at how we can best stop that and what mitigations we can do to effectively reduce that. So Te Paiaka is focused on the roots of our native riparian species, and we're looking at it as if it's like a river engineer. So if you think about it, when you pull roots, they're quite strong, whereas if you push them together, they snap. Whereas soil's the opposite. If you push soil together, it's strong. It's compact, it's cohesive. Whereas if you pull it together, it breaks, obviously. And so the way we're looking at it is if you put soil and plant roots together, especially the same ones, and you're creating a bit of a matrix and you're creating that compaction, and that basically is how you can reduce erosion. So we've chosen 11 species for Te Paiaka. That was quite a large selection process done with, mana whenua, specialists from Auckland Council, observations from the field. So here we see harakeke falling into the awa. So we really tried to focus on species that we thought would be suitable for erosion reduction and stream bank erosion reduction. So species like harakeke, which we've seen in the field that falls in, weren't selected, but we'd like to look at them later on. This is another example, kahikatea. I think this is an amazing photo. The roots have actually grown down, they kind of buttress out and are creating amazing stream bank protection. So yeah, the purpose of Te Paiaka is finding our river engineers. So what are the best species? We focused, I'm not sure if that's in the way for you. We focused on the lower bank species primarily. So Caryxosoniana, for example, is a grass. It falls over with the flow. We kind of harp on about how amazing it is, but we wanted to actually get some science, some quantitative evidence behind that to see if we were right. And yeah, just a few other species that in the field we thought looked pretty good, or species that mana whenua said would be ones that they would like to see. So these were our 11 species. So Rotahi, Pukio, Wiwi, Tuitui, Tikoka, lowland ribbonwood, lacebark, mahoe, manuka, lemonwood, and karamu. So pretty familiar species as well. We didn't want to do any ones that you might see once every 10 hectares. So kind of going into Te Paiaka, and like I said, it is very, very science heavy. And so the preliminary report and what we're going to be getting as the final report will be very kind of number heavy and data heavy. So what I'm going to try to communicate is not so sciencey, but more so, we want this work to actually be able to inform plantings, and laymen's need to be understand it. So, but the reason why it is so heavy in data is because we collected so many replicates for each species. So of the 11 species, the tensile strength section, we got 100 different data points. And so tensile strength refers to the amount of pressure it takes to break a root. And the way that we measured that was with this massive chunky kind of machine that you clip on. There's a clip that clips onto the end of a root, and then you kind of, what's it called? You pull it basically until it snaps, and then you measure the amount of pascals it takes to snap it. So for each of the species, they did that 100 different times. And this is an example of the results. So yeah, I guess you can kind of see that this is just at a first glance doesn't mean too much, but if you go into it a bit more, so tensile strength, so the amount of strength it takes is on the going up, and then the x-axis, so that's the y-axis. X-axis is the size of the root, so the root diameter. And it's actually quite interesting in relation to size. It's the smaller roots that actually have more tensile strength than the bigger roots. And that kind of makes sense, because if you think about surface area, then the smaller roots take up the most surface area. But it was an interesting find. And so, yeah, of all of them, as the roots get bigger, the tensile strength gets less, apart from cabbage tree, which is a bit funny and has kind of more an even distribution. So we'll go into that a bit more. So when you put all the 11 species together, and so the dashed species, the lower bank species, so grasses, you can kind of compare the strength and then the amount of the size of the roots. And you find, if you look at it, that's Ko-au, that's cabbage tree. Cabbage tree's got the highest tensile strength in relation to the diameter. So kind of, sciencey, but if you actually rank them together and you look at it, with 1 millimetre fine roots, we find that cabbage tree's got the highest tensile strength and lemonwood's got the lowest. And then our grasses are kind of middle, which is what you'd expect. Whereas with our 5 millimetre roots, so oops, sorry, getting bigger, our grasses are down the bottom. So grasses are great for kind of covering a lot, having those fine roots to be able to hold the ground together. But if you get deep and you actually want to kind of anchor the roots in, kind of expected, they're not so great. And that's where our bigger species come in. So cabbage tree is #1 for both of the tensile strength, which is quite interesting. And also lacebark, which I just had a feeling, and it's my favorite species, is also quite high up there. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see that. But the other side of Te Paiaka is looking at the root architecture. So it's all very well having strong roots, but if the roots only go 30 centimetres deep and, you know, 1 metre across lateral extent, it's not going to provide much root reinforcement. So root architecture is looking at the number of roots, the size of those roots, how deep they go, how far they spread across. So getting a much better picture. And this is the most data heavy, actually, although it's lower replicates, it takes so long to collect this data. So we did 10 specimens per age class, and we broke down each species into different ages. So 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10, and then 10 years plus. And the reason we did that is because often we want the quickest bang for your buck. So we want plants that are going to provide root reinforcement and erosion reduction as quickly as possible. So knowing that, you know, a species will be amazing, but it's going to take you 20 years for you to get any sort of effect on banks, that might not be so suitable. Whereas if we're looking for reducing erosion quickly in our pioneer plantings, then the 1 to 5 years is actually probably more helpful. And the way to collect root architecture is it's very old school. It's a 1 by 1 metre quadrat, which is then broken into 10 centimetre blocks. You basically put it up against the bank and you count the number of roots in each of those squares. And obviously there are a lot of roots. So an example of this, probably our worst root architecture, is wiwi. So wiwi, you can kind of see in these photos, the roots really do only go down very, very little, 20 to 30 centimetres. And they're a bit of a ball. They don't really go very far either. And they are all pretty uniform in size. So if we look at that as if, you know, you're going to get a really high flow and you've got that planted on your bank, it's not going to take a lot of energy for that to be ripped out, especially when you combine that with the tensile strength of wiwi, which, you know, we can go back, but also isn't great. So this kind of shows us if you put the two together, you can paint the picture that maybe not the best for bank stabilisation. It might have better uses planted on the floodplain or, you know, in a wetland. Whereas you'll kind of see Te Koka come up a bit. Te Koka is a bit different. So you see from these photos, and that's the quadrat I was talking about, the species, the roots, sorry, go down pretty far. There was a bit of an issue with our data collection that you can only see as far as the bank's excavated. So the data was kind of, yeah, the people that were out doing the data collection, they had, you know, they're trying to get as deep as they could to see how far down the roots went. And incised banks were great for that, but there were some cases where, you know, they just couldn't go any further down. So we don't have the complete full picture of how deep the roots go. So that was something that will come out in the final report. But yeah, you'll see Te Koka, the roots, they're going across, there's a lot of them. The size isn't really changing as the initial tensile strength graph kind of showed. It's pretty, you know, there's lots of bigger roots, there's smaller roots, there's the tap rhizome that goes down really far. And this is, yeah, when you look at the data, this is kind of, it shows it too. So the roots, it goes down a lot further. So it goes to around about 1.5 we found. And it's got a number of different size roots, which is really important for holding, you know, creating that surface area, but then also holding together the bank with the bigger roots, which is still very important. So to kind of summarize the root architecture findings, because like I said, there's a heap of data, grasses and all woody species studied, except Te Koka, had a typical decline in rooting density with depth. So the amount of roots decline as you go deeper, which makes sense. But then Te Koka, you know, is pretty uniform. They stay branching out as you go. All species except Te Koka had a non-linear decline in the number of larger diameter roots. So there's a lot more fine roots than coarse roots. The fine roots in relation to size have more tensile strength, but obviously the larger roots still take more strength to snap. So it's in relation to size, finer roots are stronger. but then obviously the bigger roots are still, overall stronger. And cabbage tree rooting density declined more gradually, and they had more roots in the 1 to 5 millimeter root diameter categories than other species. So they've got a pretty unique root architecture, which was quite cool to find. So kind of what we're all looking for and what we're hoping is to find the best species for root reinforcement and bank stabilization. And I think, yeah, it's pretty obvious to say Tikoko came out number 1. Other species were also amazing, but as these are preliminary results, I thought I'd just focus on kind of the number 1, the best egg of the lot. So yeah, looking to the future, we want to be able to guide plantings through KMR and kind of wider regional plantings as well. And it'll be incorporated into guidance documents with the aim to reduce erosion. There's also going to be some real cool work looking at, how we can include the taonga species work that's happening into Te Paiaka and vice versa. So just how we can best kind of push this across all of KMR. And so that's going to be work done with everyone here. So we'll be incorporating the results into BSTEM, which is a model that looks at the bank stability and what different mitigations you can do, and what different mitigations you can do to best reduce stream bank erosion. And then ideally, we'd love to continue to build the library. We've got 11 at the moment, but my goal and my dream is that we can just get more and more. We can look at those species that maybe aren't so good for bank stabilization, but might surprise us, or maybe there are certain environments that it will be amazing. So yeah, thank you. Are there any patai?
Kia ora, Amy.
Thank you, Tame. Kia ora, Sarah. Thank you very much for the presentation. I really enjoyed reading it and hearing from you today. Loved the photos. So interesting to see that root architecture, for the cabbage tree in particular. I've never seen that before, so that was super cool. I just had a question around the future work. I just wondered, it's beyond the scope of what you've already done, but I guess it's related. Just wondering if you will at some point be looking to understand how the different species respond to disturbance events. So, when there's a flood and damage might happen to the plantings, presumably different species have different rates of bouncing back, and just wondering if you have insights on that, or if that might be something you look at in the future. Thank you.
Good, Amy. Yeah, that's an awesome question. We, as part of Te Paiaka, we've taken soil samples from all the representative sites. So that's going to give us quite a good understanding of, Tikoko is growing amazing in this environment, but maybe with this soil it might not. And so I think with your question, that will also be quite a key kind of bit of information that if we do go into that, which I'd love to get a full picture of all our species and all the restoration kind of, how they'll work restoration long term. I think that'll also be quite a key point. So I guess long way of saying, no, we haven't looked at that yet, but yes, I'd love to, and we've got some information that would help that.
Kia ora. Tēnā koe, Justine.
Kia ora, just to add to that, and thanks, Sarah, for the team's work on Te Paiaka. It's a really important finding that will be integrated into our planting guide, and particularly as we look at making a minimum 5% of taonga species as part of our planting plans, that will become quite important to make sure that we get the best sediment reduction outcomes from that planting. But just to respond to the question from Amy, there are two things that KMR is embarking on that will look at certain aspects of resilience to extreme weather events, and particularly the sea level rise aspects, which we know are quite important. The first is, and we will be coming to Kaipara Uri representatives separately shortly on this, we have an opportunity to pilot an estuarine restoration at quite large scale. Sarah Nolan's also working on that with Auckland Council. And one of the benefits of that is, which will have a research component as well as a remediation component, is to understand the estuarine species that are going to be resilient to sea level rise and saltwater intrusions, if you like. So there's many benefits to this pilot, but one of them will actually be, I guess, we will see and be able to demonstrate from a scientific standpoint what the resilience are of certain species in that salt marsh type environment. So that's something we have mentioned it very briefly, Amy, but we will bring that back. In Kaipara we have an invitation from Auckland Council, from the team we're working with, to trial that on a Māori-owned piece of land. We've identified a couple of spatial areas that meet the criteria from a biophysical point of view. The second aspect there is also just in respect of you may have seen from the from the Potataki report that we are engaging with some of the research providers around the country, including and Tame will correct me if I have the name wrong, but there's an Indigenous research centre that's been stood up down south, but it's a national one with whakapapa links back into the Kaipara. And there is a proposal for a flagship research site with Ngāti Whātua, which will look at sea level rise impacts and how to be resilient to them. And I would imagine that if we have anything to do with it, we KMR have anything to do with it, that will also include planting and look at resilience from a species selection point of view. So we'll keep you posted. Some of that is rolling out at the timeframes that our partners are comfortable with, but I'm really excited about both of those projects. And I think it will, in a longer term program, show us good results. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Any further questions from any of the members?
Kia ora, thank you. Sorry, did you?
No. Go for it, Penny.
Sorry, I thought you said my name. Kia ora, Sarah, thank you for that. Just a couple of quick questions, and just to your point, Justin, yeah, that Ngāti Whātua flagship site was mentioned in one of the reports, wasn't it? Yeah. So yeah, just a couple. So would it be correct to assume, and it would be an assumption, that the plants that work on the riverbanks or trees, like cabbage tree, would they be similar to the hill country to stop erosion? And also just how much impact the soil type would have on these results, and is that part of the study that's been done? Kia ora.
Kia ora, Penny. I would say yes. I think that's actually going to be part of the final report as well. So these are quite preliminary. It's awesome to be able to share them, but yeah, these questions, especially regarding the soil, that's definitely going to be a big part of the report. We actually found that the soil was really interesting, and that soil that gets saturated more, the species had shallower rooting depths. So kind of where the water comes up to, that's kind of normally where the roots stop growing so well. So where it comes to hill country erosion, obviously you wouldn't have that issue so much. So yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say personally that, yeah, depending on the other obviously environments and how, you know, they respond to being out in the open and the wind stress and that sort of thing, I'd say yes. Some of the lower species, probably not like the characters that need wet feet, obviously, but the kind of woodier species. Yeah, I'd say so. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Kia ora, Sarah.
Kia ora, Sheree.
Hey, just wanted to acknowledge the mahi gun, Sarah. I know it's you've been on this kaupapa for a wee while. I also know you inherited the kaupapa of the Hōtio. And just want to thank you for the mahi being done, and also the extension that I can see coming. And when I say that, the cabbage tree, te kauka, is very much a medicinal tree. Even as a young child, we had to shimmy up the tree to go and get the top leaves, to come down to even deal to some of the mosquito bites that we had received. And so I'm really excited about that. And also the new teachings as we come through as uri, conservation soil as well as root archives is going to be really important as we move forward. And also how much we look forward to seeing the cabbage tree when it flowers, because we know it's time to go get those nice fat white mussels. Also the roe is fat in the ika. So the more we see them, the more you'll see us smiling, and our puku's wanting to get full. So I look forward to seeing you at the Kaitiaki monitoring, Sarah, on the 24th. And thank you very much, and the team too. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Sheree. Appreciate that.
Any further questions? I've got a couple of comments. I think we should be very careful about using the term quick bang for our buck, because we've seen that work to the demise of waterways. And I'm talking here crackjack willows, quick fix ideas, poke a hole in the ground, stick a rod in and walk away. That terminology and that approach is so 1960s and 1970s. I think we've made big advances in science and technology in development as humans, not ever to go back and play in that sandpit. The second, well, I've got 3 questions, I suppose. The proximity of these trial sites to actual wetlands, to swamps, to stream tributaries, Sarah, I think goes along the same line as soil type and presence of other factors such as rock, stone, shingle. And I think with it comes the option and opportunity to connect this work with the soil conservation strategy, and that's taking, you know, the idea of retaining soil in its natural sort of source area. So if Te Koka is recognized for its root structure, is there an option that compares that root structure with some of the exotic examples that are being promoted for use on high country or hill country or steeper country or drier country? Something along the lines of that line of thinking. And I'm intrigued that Wee has featured as one of the top 11, because in my youth, in my time growing up, Wee was regarded the same rating as Manuka. You need to slash it, you need to get rid of it. And so I'm just wondering when, you know, if there is any sort of comparison that the rating that Wee or Russians have got over time has been completely misunderstood in terms of the sediment controls, especially if you're talking about pasture from, you know, this is not all about riverbank management. These waterways, these sort of internal tributaries and drains as well. And if Wee has a role in supporting those edges or those riparian margins, and I think it should be included in your, you know, in the guidance that goes alongside the advice, Sarah. But just one final point. I was aware of the American hydrologist, or the guy that came out and was talking about tensile strength testing of the riverbank on Hawteo. And is there some way of connecting these species with what that study was talking about as well? So I think there's some relativity between the soil type, the sort of locality of streams or wetlands or steep slope, gradient and all that could be really quite useful for application across the catchment. But great stuff, keep it up, and yeah, just be interested in those sort of key areas, I think. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Tane. If I can just respond to a couple of points. So we are working, it's Andrew Simon, he's the geomorphologist, so we work with them on this project. It's kind of, Blanket Research has done this project, but to a much lower data heavy extent. So we are taking learnings from Andrew and his work over in the States and kind of bringing it back to New Zealand. And because obviously he is American, it means a lot of the species, the exotics that we're using, some are Australian, some are from America, they've already got root kind of understanding of, so they've done the root architecture and tensile strength. So it means that we can kind of cross compare, which I think will be a helpful next step.
Yeah. That's it. Thank you. No further questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and look forward to the next iteration. Moving to 6.4 and the update as to where Kōrero Tukuiho is at with pathway timelines and the likes from William Wright and Fiona Kim. Before we move into, before handing over, can I get someone to move and also a seconder for the receipt of the report on Kōrero Tukuiho by William Wright and Fiona Kim? To have a mover and a seconder, please. Is that Sherry? Sherry moved to have a seconder. Amy, moved by Cherie, seconded by Amy, that we received the report by William Wright and Fiona Kim. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Indicate. Kia ora. Any objections? Any abstentions? And just before handing over to William, we just, we had a big discussion about conflict of interest. It's quite important that we actually move the receipt of these reports instead of having a big discussion and someone might say, well, I didn't actually agree with receiving the report in the first place. 1 and 1 still makes 2 in my books. And we, trying to jam them all up as collective responses might look efficient, but doesn't actually read that way. So that's why we're taking the time to pluck out receiving the report first and then get on and discuss it. So, tēnā koe, Whitabu.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair, and good morning to members of the committee. Firstly, my apologies from Fiona. Fiona is unable to come, so it's my pleasure to report and speak to the Kōrero Tukuiho paper that you have in front of you. Just a bit of background. The Kōrero Tukuiho project, or certainly Mātauranga Māori that it was formerly known as, the original contract was signed between, through the KMR, between the Northern Regional Council and Te Uriahau Settlement Trust, the environmental arm being Environs Holdings Limited. And since that time, there's been really 2 major issues with this program. Certainly the first has been the COVID settings and protocols and things like that, and our inability to move as quickly. In saying that, we're still on track, but to actually have concrete conversations, kōrero, with our people through the maraes and at the post-settlement governance entities. And of course, of recent, we are dealing with an issue of capacity, and that capacity is within Uriahau Environs Holdings Limited. The reason Fee can't be here today, she's going through various induction with some staff and new staff that are potentially coming on. So what we actually have done is actually we've turned our attention to date to actually contract through this contract that Uriahau has with KMR, contract a project manager and to come and manage this this program for us. So I've actually had discussions. I tried to get hold of the person and speak directly on Friday. I am aware that person has a flu or COVID-like symptoms, so that hasn't happened to date. What we have done over the last couple of months, certainly this year, we've actually been to quite a lot of hui, and that's not only myself, but that's also Fiona, because a lot of the programs that we actually have out there are follow-over programs from the Auckland Council, Northern Regional Council, and dealing with the past Integrated Kaipara Harbour Management Group. And so, as you've heard briefly from Sarah, the Hotio project have within its folds a Kōrero Tuku Iho framework. We also have a similar project in the northern part of the catchment, and that was the Wairoa project, or more so known as the Waima Waitai Waiora project, and that was dealing with Te Kaua Waiora. So what we've done, as we indicated in the at the workshop, our planning, our project planning was based on three considerations, three themes. And the first one is what we call the line of inquiry. And so the first thing we want to do with the project manager is to actually do an initial stock take. And I put it in this way. We do have the Hotio, we do have the Waima Waitai Waiora project, but of course I've actually heard and spoken to I know no mga whakahi are going through a process of Kōrero Tuku Iho. I know Ngāti Manuhiri are also doing the same. Uria Hau has actually completed something quite some time ago. So we wanted to actually do a stock take of what we actually have out there and bring that back to the table. Another part of this inquiry is we want to be able to tap in, so to speak, or actually identify our kaumata and queer pukenga and others that could well support this project. E.g. Charles Royal is one major source of knowledge and experience. We also want to be able to then establish a sort of a catchment reference group, and we do have a time frame for that by the end of September. We actually have hope to have these people in place. And from there, obviously, to set a terms of reference, e.g. on how and how regular they want to meet, etc., and what is their role as a reference group or a kaumata and queer whare to be able to oversee, support this program. The other thing too is what we call the assumptions. Will we actually have the resource and the technical expertise to be able to bring Kōrero Tuku Iho to a place and a position specifically for the Kaipara Moana remediation? And do we actually, and are we approaching the conversation with our people, with our marae, with our hapu, with our whānau, to be able to extract the kōrero, the place-based kōrero that we want to capture for the program. But it's more than just a program, and I'll get to that. And then, of course, will we have the actual resource, the facilities to be able to do that? The other one is the consideration is how do we bring Kōrero Tuku Iho into the framework of settlement reduction plans, and ultimately at the end of the day, which will then morph into the farm environmental plans. How will Kōrero Tuku Iho play a part to influence policy, regulations, and any bylaws that Kōrero Tuku Iho through this program could actually benefit in the bigger sort of arena or wider area? And do we actually have how do we actually engage with landowners post Kōrero Tuku Iho to actually support them and actually give assistance to how they best manage their farm practices? The other sort of consideration too is the what we call the taonga species. And of course, we've just heard from Sarah. And so how will Kōrero Tuku Iho, from an eco-district sort of position, for us to gather seed, propagate plants, and then to replant those species back inside those eco-districts. And of course, the last point I want to mention here is the seed collection, the seed banking. And again, you've just seen what Sarah has produced. And I'll just use the cabbage tree as an example. Do we actually have enough knowledge, and this will come through the stock take, do we actually have enough knowledge at the moment to actually start the seed collection, the seed banking, while we're going through the fuller process of Kōrero Tuku Iho? And I'm sort of thinking, and probably suggesting also, I think we have enough to actually start this process of collecting seed, identifying certain species from those eco-districts that belong to the river systems per se, so to speak. And while that's actually happening, because some of these taonga species, and I'm trying to think quite ahead of the program itself, is it'll take some years to actually propagate some of these taonga species to be ready to be planted where we want them to be planted. And of course, that's part of Kōrero Tuku Iho. Are we planting the right plant in the right place for the right purpose? So taking that all into account, I am saying that we are on track. We've actually had issues. We do have issues right at the moment, and that is capacity within Environs Holdings Limited. All going well. Once we can secure or second a project manager, we'll be able to, and subject to COVID settings and the like, to be able to get out there to our maraes, to our kaumata and queer. And of course, that's another probably a risk management is some of our kaumata and queer are quite elderly, and we just got to think about their health, not only through the COVID settings and the flu that's going around at the moment and other illnesses, but also the cooler period. So, in my world, dealing with mana whenua, Kaipara uri, is a lot of our huis actually start happening around the spring and summertime when it's quite warm. So in a nutshell, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, that's my report for the Kōrero Tuku Iho project. With that, I'm happy to take any questions from members of the committee.
Kia ora, Wiremu. Thank you very much for that report and update, and offer the opportunity for questions from people. I've got a couple of comments, but I'll save mine to the end. Well, you've done a great job, Wiremu.
I did, well, I've got the opportunity to, Mr. Chair, Tami. I just listened to Cherie, she's talking about the cabbage seed, koka, and it's flowering, and it's and those are the sort of things that we want to capture in Kōrero Tuku Iho, and how the flowering of the cabbage tree when our muscles are fat and things like that. These are very, very important conversations we need to have with our people. I was up in the Mangakahi about 2 weeks ago, and they're talking about a tree, a specific species of tree called the kahia. And I've never heard of it before, but there's people up there, Malay up there, who talk quite strongly about this plant that actually is specific to the Mangakahi region. And it's very similar to the...
You have just discovered the real reason behind shifting away from Mātauranga Māori to Kōrero Tuku Iho. And we're pretty particular about how we sell the quality of our kubara and our kahia plants. Those that are interested in this plant, it's a member of the passion fruit family, got a white flower, It has actually has a fruit similar to it has a flower similar to the banana passion fruit. So if you remember banana passion fruit, that's what the kahia plant looks like. Often misspelt with an O in place of the first A, and the first A has a macron on it. So it's I don't think there's been any plants seen on the banks since the native cover's come off. But those that are interested in behind the Patatiri Hall is a native reserve. Go for a walk in there and you'll see that probably pay to wait till springtime. But there I saw some of those plants in there 5-6 years ago. So that's one place I know where that is actually growing in the back of that the Patatiri Hall up there on Patatiri Road off State Highway 14, is it? Dargaville to Whangarei. But wanted to come back and just make a comment about, I think there's a lot to be gained out of sort of literature review, program review, with a move around aligning, work that's gone on in this sort of general area and how we connect or make an alignment. And I'm glad you brought that example up because it's the opportunity to gather the significance of the culture and the heritage and the legacy involved in those matters that are significant. And I want to add to that the special natural or significant natural areas or sites of significance, or even provisions that have already been dedicated or allocated or assigned. So you have archaeological authorities, you have reserves by nature or by virtue of their design, and you have areas that have either covenanted or been designated. And I think the opportunity here is to capture that by catchment. And so Ngā Kōrero Tuku Iho was about keep growing that from that point up towards a decision-making table. In time, it'll be the Kaipara Moana body table. And of course, the Kaipara Moana body table being absolutely clear on the impact of their decision-making on places that are regarded as significant by local people. So I just made a couple of notes here. I think the provisions have to take two lines of inquiry. And I mean this in terms of we're sitting in this context here as Kaipara Uri and local government and the Crown. And I think it's going to be like that for certainly the next generation, of having hapu iwi at one point, the Crown at another point, and local government at a different point. Now, as much as we'd like to think in an integrated manner, I think we have to maintain our lanes. We have to maintain the integrity of what each are doing. Because if you break that back to the land areas that we're dealing with now, we can all be uri of a particular land block, which is slightly different to being the name on the certificate of title. And I say this from a perspective of there's 130 acres. You've got 2 urupa on it. Those urupa are not registered. The back boundary to this 130 acres is the Mangakahia River. No way am I or my descendants or my siblings and fellow relatives are going to subscribe to a third party coming in to determine how those urupa are to be managed or looked after in the scheme of sediment reduction, of longevity, because the legacy of those places belongs with those uri. And I think this is pretty typical of places within our catchment. And so I guess the provisions that we are seeking here are, how do we keep that alignment in those contexts? Is there an intellectual property, data sovereignty component to all of this? And when you talk about, when our kōrero, our efforts talk about taonga species, is there some kind of mechanism that we should be providing for in our thinking, that through the growth of the program, our efforts are connected with plants in the ground, fences erected, and so on. But I guess it's keeping the degrees of separation to a point where they can be accommodated in the work that kōrero tuku iho is taking. But kōrero tuku iho should not be replicating what Reconnecting Northland is doing with its Kawawai Māori program. And I think we're getting down to the tin tacks of places that are significant within the margins of the Kaipara Moana remediation. So if these places are bound by the river catchment, I think there's a level of provision that could even be as broad and or discrete as requiring district plan changes. And it's at that level that I think we have to be mindful of the rights, the provisions for property rights, whether it's at a individual uri, an individual corporation, an individual hapu, or for that matter, individual iwi. And I think it's a pretty important point to put front and center of where kōrero tuku iho is heading. I think your line of inquiry idea, the identification of pukenga, creation of catchment reference groups, that's fine. It's in that context of keeping the local place-based component absolutely clear on their role and their sort of connection to the program, because we are certainly quite used to having people from outside of the district sort of arriving with their
knowledge.
Yeah, with their external knowledge. And just to wrap this up and probably try and summarize the point I made, we had Charles Royal come and visit 3 marae sites on the Mangakahia catchment, but then the overall idea was to try and bundle it all up and give this one joyous report at a venue outside of Mangakahia. And guess what happened? The sites, or the people from those 3 marae sites, they felt out of place.
Yeah.
I know 3 of them were at that launch and were in the background. They found it real strange to have their place, their concerns being spoken about in their presence without their involvement.
Yeah.
It's been like, it'd be like you and I trying to resolve Putin and the Ukraine issues. Kia ora.
Yeah, no, thank you. Any further questions from members of the committee?
I've just got a couple, if that's okay, Tame.
Yep, by all means.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
Kia ora, Willie. Thank you. I can see it's been a rather frustrating time for you, just to get going. So I hope it all goes a bit more smoothly now. I see in the fourth recommendation there, it talks about implementation, and I'm just wondering if you could just clarify for me what the actual implementation will be. I'm sort of picking up that it'll be the seed collection, the ability to know which tree in the right place and where. Is there more to it than that?
Yeah, there is actually. So the original contract, or the one that we have present with Environs Holding Limited, is actually in two stages, two phases. One is developing the strategy and then taking that strategy, then implementing it. And that was put together by those that, when we look at the end of the day, this wasn't discussed, its approach wasn't discussed with Kaipara. What we've actually found out is that the strategy and implementation, in other words, the doing part, is all actually part of one. So to actually develop the strategy, we've got to actually get out there and engage with our people, because they are part of the strategy. That's the implementation. And that was what we presented in the workshop, that originally the contract sits at the moment, it still does, in two phases. But we can't, from our point of view, it is actually the two phases coming together to actually develop the overall Kōrero Tuku Iho framework.
Okay, thanks, Willie, because my thinking was that there'd be more to it than just it concluding in the first quarter, at the end of the first quarter of 2023. It will be an ongoing.
Oh, that's right, exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And that point, I think, was made over a year ago, that with Kōrero Tuku Iho, it will be an involving strategy, it will be an involving sort of implementation. But we can get to a stage where we're comfortable that it'll work or suit the remediation.
Yeah.
So because this program has a period of so many years, but the whole remediation ongoing, this will be generational. Kōrero Tuku Iho will be a generational movement.
Yeah. So I guess my last question would be to you and perhaps Justine. So the wording in number 4, is that sort of correct, or you're happy, you're comfortable with that? And that implementation will be finished? It just might give the wrong impression from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm just coming back to that. Yeah. No, probably not. It probably needs to be reworded. How you do that with through your committee. No, I think what we're trying to say here is that, and this is probably more so with the budget. I didn't actually include the funds in that. There is a present budget that's been given under the present contract. I think when it comes to the end of that period, the first quarter, we'll actually have a better idea. Will we have enough funds to actually complete or carry on with Kōrero Tuku Iho?
Can I pass over to Justine, please?
Oh, kia ora Tame, kia ora Willie. Just to help perhaps clarify, because Fiona Kemp isn't in the conversation today, she's unable to be here, as Willie mentioned. What that means is we'll need to check back what the end of March 2023 time frame related to. It will be a stage in the project delivery. She's very program focused, which is great. My sense is it may have been the what I call the synthesis view of the existing set of information relating to kororo tokoiho that's already in place and in train, and then I believe that there's a set of engagements that will then roll out. But look, let's triple check that, and we will make sure that the minutes reflect the reality of the project delivery. I would be quite keen myself to have clarity there as to what stages of work are in a project sense. So, you know, delivering creating a product, for me, that would look like a bit of a synthesis view of the kororo tokoiho from all of the different kaipara uri. There'll be some that we can collect as a first stage now, if you like, that review work that Willie talked about. And then there'll be an engagement piece of work to, I guess, reflect ongoing conversations and ongoing exposure, if you like, of those special places, special connections, special stories. And so I believe we can get some greater clarity, as Willie mentioned, and let's work through with Fiona Kemp under the contract to understand what that looks like. We're very happy to keep the Joint Committee apprised of as clarity emerges.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.
All right. Thank you for that, Justine. It is a pretty complicated sort of an area. The last thing we need to be put on the back for, and particularly from those that have been quite active in this area, is not giving them an opportunity to state their case. And I can give you 2 candidates right now, located in the upper reaches of the Wairua River, who would be very, very able to decorate our agenda with all sorts of complaints about not giving these opportunities. So that is certainly a driver for clarity, Wiramu. If there are no further questions, can we then make the adjustment to recommendation 4 to reflect the clarification will be sought as to the status of the project? Is that sufficient for today?
Tame, I just wonder if you take out the words "and implementation," just take them out.
Okay.
Yeah, happy with that.
Happy with that?
Yeah.
All right. If there are no further questions, someone move agenda item 6.4, resolutions 2 through to 5. Moved by Penny Smart. Do we have a seconder? Going once.
Tame, it's Georgina. I'm happy to second that.
Kia ora, Georgina.
Good report as well.
All right.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Have a good day.
And all those in favour, please indicate your support. Kia ora. Any objections? No abstentions, I take it. And that's carried. So moving to agenda item 6.5, our final agenda item. And on page 47 of our agenda papers, did someone move we receive this report, please? Moved by Jane. Do you have a seconder?
Georgina will second.
Seconded by Georgina. All those in favour, please say aye. It will indicate so. Kia ora. Any objections? Any abstentions? Thank you. And pass it over to Justine. Kia ora, Justine.
Kia ora. So Stephanie Versteeg is unwell today, so apologies you have me instead on this paper. She's obviously been working really hard, including with some of the Joint Committee members to develop this paper. But in short, a couple of statements, if you like, about this. As the Joint Committee members will all be aware, the soil conservation strategy and implementation plan, like kororo tokoiho, is one of the foundational parts of the KMR program. And if KMR intends to meet its aspirations to scale up and reduce sediment in line with the indicative business case, in line with our investment outcomes, we really need this strategy and it to be implemented. And just to put it bluntly, Riparian fencing and planting is quite key. It's always going to be a foundational element of KMR. But, as Sarah Nolan mentioned today, in some areas, some parts of the catchments, the sub-catchments of the Kaipara Moana catchment, stream bank erosion is really fundamental to managing that. It's fundamental to reducing sediment flows into the Moana. And we also have hill country erosion, which can release very significant areas of the land and in terms of sediment and erosion proneness. And we do also want to manage larger scale areas like that, including through a range of activities. The Joint Committee might remember we had a workshop earlier in the year on where we're at to date around thinking about the hill country erosion potential, and earlier work on what were the potential range of options to remediate to stop that sediment from the hill country. We are proposing to bring back some pretty substantive options to workshop before Christmas with the Joint Committee, but in the meantime, this paper seeks endorsement from the Joint Committee for a process and a set of people to help guide our discussions. And so what is proposed is a soil conservation reference group that is endorsed by the Joint Committee to start work with immediate or nearly immediate effect to help sit alongside some of the technical inputs and make sure that the right range of views, if you like, a representative range of views are inputting into that strategy development. And we know that already soil conservation settings are very important, not just to Kaipara Uri, but in respect of achieving our outcomes. And there are a lot of different perspectives around the table that we want to understand and reflect. So this paper proposes two things. It proposes a joint reference group terms of reference, a reference group terms of reference for your endorsement, and it also suggests a set of representatives on that reference group for endorsement. Now, with noting that if the named individuals are unable or unwilling for any reason, e.g. they're too busy to be part of this reference group, that we would also seek endorsement from the Joint Committee to engage with Deputy Chair and Chair to find appropriate substitutes. So I'm hoping, we know that Malcolm Welsh has been helping Steph Versteeg also with this process. Willie Wright has been involved too. So what I would like to do before we move to questions and comments is just to invite either Willie and or Malcolm just to add anything that they would like to add to the paper. Thank you. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora, Justine. Yeah, probably just a bit of general comment from myself and my involvement. I guess my thinking around the particularly afforestation conversations will draw commercial considerations. I guess if there's any landholder looking at afforestation, they will highly look. There'll be a commercial consideration there. So it's probably something we need to understand and mitigate. And probably the other thing is there's a lot of other organisations that are responsible in those places, and probably just having a good line of sight across all of those contributing organisations would be good in this space. Yeah, probably that's some general comment.
If I might respond, Malcolm, kia ora, thank you for that. That's very helpful. And I know you've spoken to Steph around this, and I believe she's has a process in mind to allow some of those agency views and technical inputs to be had. And I know she has in mind some economic or econometric modelling as well to help with this important piece of work. So if I've heard you correctly, I think she's well across those 2 points. But thank you for making the Joint Committee aware of what we need to take care of too. That's very helpful. Kia ora.
And just perhaps my general comment to the Joint Committee is the last page. You'll see we do have proposed members, and certainly from Kaipara's point of view, I have yet to speak to Leah and Maiki, and specifically with Ngau Manga Whakahi. Ngau Manga Whakahi are having a hui this month with their marae, and I believe they will probably cement or secure further a person or people to be part of the soil conservation strategy. Thank you. Thanks, Justin.
I guess that leaves the opportunity for questions. Kia ora, Amy.
Kia ora, Tame. Thank you, Justine. Yeah, really supportive of this piece of work and excited that, you know, we're making progress. I just had two questions when I read the paper. The first one, I guess, I don't have full visibility of, so there's going to be the technical group, which I know there are some core members, but in the workshop you also spoke about bringing in skill sets as required. And then obviously there's the membership here that we're looking to endorse today. I guess just looking at that list of people we're looking to endorse, I think we've got really good coverage of people currently operating in the catchment and the knowledge needed to understand current land use and the challenges of utilising the land as we do so now, and what might be the challenges of different land use. I guess I'm not totally sure that the question I have is, are we confident we have enough expertise in that group around remediation itself? I felt just from my looking at who they were and where they come from, and understanding that they are appointed as individuals, not actual representatives of the organisations. But yeah, just wondered if we potentially had a little bit of a lightness, I guess, on the remediation environmental side, but unsure whether that will be covered off in your mind through the technical group more so. So I guess just a comment on that would be really useful. And then my only other question was just around the terms of reference, and that this reference group will be commenting on work done by the technical group. Under point 11, A, B, C, and D, it lists kind of the process through which those comments will be given and the feedback. Just a question, would that commentary and feedback from the reference group then become visible for the Joint Committee as part of our process, or does it get incorporated into the updated drafts that then come to us? Just wondering, yeah, if it's kind of something we see, or if the work gets brought together and then given to us. So those are my two questions.
Kia ora, Amy. I can speak to my extent of the knowledge of the specifics, but we will look back round in case I get this wrong. One step as well.
Yeah.
But I think I will check around this adequate remediation expertise on the reference group. I believe that will be covered off by what we're calling the project team, if you like. But you may well be making a valid point around whether the future or alternative land use expertise is covered off well enough in the reference group versus in the technical advice and or project team. So we're not talking about it is a technical group, but we're just talking about it being a project group. The avoidance of gout, there's two groups. One's getting on and doing the mihi, if you like, and the reference group is reviewing and steering and making sure that appropriate viewpoints are visible and understood, and that this project is capturing and responding to those points, with the Joint Committee being decision makers. In terms of the visibility of that input for the reference group, my expectation is we could do either. I'm not sure we've got to the point of clarity on that. Andrew Sholem will be chairing the reference group, in case that wasn't clear from the paper. He's very expert. He ran the Land and Water Forum, for those who know him, and he's also helping in this regard in respect of the digital tools reference group. He has a very sound and well demonstrated ability to reflect the various viewpoints around the table. We understand that consensus will be hard and perhaps not possible. My expectation is whether it's tabled alongside to the joint committee or whether it's integrated into the advice, there will be visibility of the varying viewpoints around the reference group. If there is any preference from the joint committee around how we make those varying viewpoints transparent and visible, I'm open-eared to that for now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I think you've understood my two questions well, and so yeah, happy just to support where we're heading today and kind of see how it unfolds. So thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, through the chair. So that's, yes, thank you, Amy, for that question, because that answered one of my questions. Thanks. In this particular report, we are endorsing those names that are in that particular report, because I had forwarded other names that had gone through Ngā Maunga. So just wanted to know, are you able to tease me out on whether there are those who would be individual or those that are supported by Kaipara entities?
Kia ora, Jane. I'm unclear as to, apologies, I'm not close enough to the detail of this paper without Steph's being here. Willie may have more information, but can I check on the level of endorsement? I understood there was a meeting tomorrow that from Steph, she texted this morning, that would look at your nominated person. So I believe that there is a process still to be gone through in respect of your nominated person, and we will accept that nomination. Have I got that right?
No, that's, I just wanted to know the named ones.
Yes, I believe that the named person there was at the time of writing and submitting of the paper to the pack, and we are happy to take a subsequent nominee once you have had a chance to hui and korero on that matter.
Okay then. Okay, kia ora.
So it can be subject to Ngā Maunga Whakihi.
Can I emphasise, we're either going to support the members as individuals who are going to provide their skill sets to the task, or we're going to play merry-go-round with our entities. I know one of those names on there lives across the road from me, and I can tell you now, he wouldn't be wasting his time chasing an entity to back him. That's Greg Alexander. If it's the same Greg Alexander that farms in Mangakahia. And we either set this up to recruit people who are keen to engage as individuals. I don't think we're playing tag around entities, giving them a seal of approval or anything like that at all. If we are, then I think we've got an issue. And the issue is this. Our terms of reference set out our option to engage people who understand the mechanisms behind conserving soil. I subscribe to skill sets of people I recognize on there, but if we're leaving it to our entities to have a say, no, I think this is a joint committee matter, and we have undertaken to provide soil conservation in our foundation exercise. So we're either considering the names that have been submitted as a joint committee or not. Kia ora. are we in a position to have a vote? Or call for a mover and a seconder on the resolutions attached to agenda item 6.5, numbers 2 through to 4?
If I could ask a question, Tammy, Councillor Players. Yeah, just in terms of, I'm just trying to get some comfort about any, are there any, it might be a question to the officers, Tammy, rather than yourself, I'm not sure, but more than anyone's welcome to answer it, and that's just around, are we creating a potential for some kickback or people being left out that should be included? I just want that comfort, Tammy, around the. I've just got a sense of potential, some potential conflict, and I just want to get peace of mind around that.
Yeah, I guess what my understanding of it is that these individuals have been approached to check their availability to become part of a soil conservation reference group. Then somewhere in the lead up to this, we're now entertaining the idea that entities are going to be the endorsement of entities seems to be what I heard Jane talking about. So either Kaipara Māori Kura have gone out to find members to populate the soil conservation reference group, and that's the list that's provided here. If that's not the case, then I mean, I recognize one name on there. I don't know how Greg Alexander's name comes to be on there, but I can categorically say he will be one individual landowner, farmer, who would be a terrific asset on there, but he won't be tolerating any seemingly, it's a growing concern that I hear in the traps of we are becoming a little bit over the top in terms of our bureaucracy. We've been at this for coming up 2 years, and we are about to launch off what is seemingly a foundation part of Kaipara Moana, remediation, and we're introducing another level of bureaucracy to recruit individual people with the skill sets in a pretty specialized area, I might add. But if that's the choice of the committee, then so be it.
Thanks, Tammy. I think Justine's got her hand up as well. Justine, did you want to comment? I'm obviously interested in any comment from the other committee members too. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
So Penny had her hand up for a while. I'm happy to hear from her first, but I'm then very happy to table my thoughts, Councillor Green.
Kia ora, Justine. Through you, Tammy. Just a couple of comments. One to do with what we're talking about at the moment. I think we could, well, and I agree, Tammy, but I also hear what you're saying, Jane, but I think we could get ourselves tangled up in knots because this won't be the only reference group that we're going to have, and I think we might be better off leaving it as an operational matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my comment there. And the other, I was listening to Amy's comment about land use, and a bit tricky knowing who's going to be the future land use users, but maybe a compromise would be a kumagra, a horticulturist kumagra. They predominantly farm on the flats and near the river, so that may be someone to think of too. But yeah, as far as the choice of people on that list, I think we'd be safer and easier, and probably process-wise better to leave it as operational. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Penny. Kia ora, Justine.
Or Malcolm, I think. I'm happy to go
Okay.
last. Yep.
Kia ora, Malcolm.
Oh yeah, kia ora. Just a bit more context, I guess, when I was approached by Steph. So I guess one of my, and I may have said it earlier, my considerations is that we don't overcomplicate what we're trying to do, or this group, or their purpose. And I guess, I made a couple of suggestions in that group, and I guess I took my steer was the the purpose of the group, or the objective, to help us set our policy settings around investment. And so my considerations in that was, again, getting that a good line of sight across different considerations for different people and organizations, so that we've got some real alignment in there, and we're not doing things that others are perhaps responsible for, or who have an interest in it, in that area. And to put it simply, there's forestry companies out there. That's afforestation. So it's just having that line of sight coming through this group for me, and those key considerations when we set our investment policy around these other funding streams. I guess if we're moving away from the waterways and we're getting into afforestation and other things. So yeah, hopefully that's a bit more context from my thinking. Got it.
Kia ora. I'm happy to round up. I think what today's discussion just highlights that the Mōrikura are trying to move at pace to get this work, which is so key, in train, and we have not approached the names on the list yet. And so I think we've had some early discussions with a couple of them, but we really wanted to, if you like, test a list, and it's been evolving, and no doubt it will continue to evolve to reflect availability from a number of people on the list. So it's if you like, an indicative list of types and individuals who are needed to help this korero forward. For the Kaipara early groups, given that there is a meeting tomorrow after which we will hear perhaps some other technical leaders, I'm really happy to hear from Namunga Whaki and others if there's other early reps that are to be considered in the mix, because I'll be honest, the paper was tabled because it was ready and needed to be finalised for tabling to the joint committee. Our thinking is still moving and evolving around the representatives. I think perhaps Penny's line of inquiry is most helpful, that the Mōrikura needs to work through those who are available and have time and technical resource to contribute to this reference group, noting the conversations from today around the various technical expertises. We may find we still have one or two gaps in their space from the sounds of it. And as with Councillor Sayers, I don't want to leave people behind if it's important, not necessarily representative or an agency, driven perspective, but we'll try and make this work. And then in a time frame that's appropriate for getting the work done, if the Mōrikura can have permission to then convene this group and get it going, I think that would be a way of managing those multiple perspectives and needs. It is a reference group, not a decision-making group. We are looking for technical expertises across quite a broad range, including future, and thanks for the thoughts around the need for commercial interests there. That's absolutely true. And as well as the reference group, we are going to be commissioning quite technical pieces of work that will be considered by that reference group that, if you like, matches some of the skill gaps that will inevitably emerge through the strategy development process. So with permission, I would like to recommend that the Mōrikura takes the names on the list with one or two extra inputs in the next, say this week, and we get that going as fast as we can in line with our strategic objectives, hearing today from the Joint Committee, and working with the Deputy Chair and Chair if there's any major departures from what we've heard over the last hour or two. Thank you.
Can we go back to the recommendations And is there a recommendation? I don't have it in front of me. In there that says that accurately, concisely, that the establishment of the soil conservation reference group is a Kaipara Māori kura task endorsed by the Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee. So I think fundamentally what I was trying to avoid was another layer of bureaucracy that had us dancing around some entities who one has a meeting tomorrow, the next one has a meeting on Friday, the next one has a meeting on the 26th. By then it's September and we're into drought. No, I don't mean that.
Don't say
But,
Yes,
yeah, but if those resolutions can actually reflect what you've just alluded to, it's trying to reduce the layers of bureaucracy that we seem to become an expert at creating. And by that, I really want to encourage Kaipara Māori kura to push ahead and get it established. It is a reference group. True, correct. And if those resolutions do reflect that, I don't have mine in front of me.
Sorry, kia ora Tame, I'm happy to speak to this. There was a reason that we didn't say approved. It was endorsed with some caveats around the fact that we haven't approached the individuals yet. Perhaps that's too fine a scale definition, and perhaps I'm new to council. Perhaps that doesn't mean a lot in council land, but it was designed to allow the Māori kura that operational flexibility to approach individuals. A broad endorsement of the set comments today was endorsement from the Joint Committee, and I think that allows us the flexibility and the timeliness of hearing from others and from yourselves today, and then closing that off and making it an operational decision to take that reference group forward. So I believe that the current recommendations for the Joint Committee, the decisions for the Joint Committee today are appropriate, but I'll be happy to be guided by those on council who are more experienced in this than myself.
Well, I guess for me, it would even be more streamlined if you covered, that last resolution, number 4, talks about members who are, or the candidates that may not be available. Discussions be held with the chair and deputy chair about expediting that. I think it's in that general area that it'd be useful to have it in there that we want Kaipara Māori kura. I take that as a consensus to get on and get this thing moving and have those necessary discussions. Yeah, here we go. Amy, thank you, Amy, that the Māori kura be endorsed to establish a reference group. Well done, Amy. You're on to it. Thank you very much. Well, Penny, sorry.
Yeah, something similar. Thank you, Tame. I was too slow to put my hand down, but that sounds okay. I was just going to suggest that the proposed membership categories of the reference group be endorsed, but either or.
Yep. Okay, very good. So we've all heard that. Item 6.5, sorry, not to cut anyone off. Are there any further questions or comments? Let the conservation begin. And call on a mover and a seconder for resolutions of agenda item 6.5, numbers 2 to 4 on page 47. Do you have a mover, please? Amy McDonald. Do you have a seconder?
Kia ora, Malcolm.
Kia ora, Malcolm Welsh. And all those in favour, please say aye or indicate.
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much. Well, tātou mā, we've concluded our agenda. If there are there any outstanding matters or any of general business, other matters, other business? Thank you, Justine, and everyone from Mauri Kura, Ilka, tēnā koe. Thank you very much. And we have run 1 minute over time. We managed to squeeze in a half-hour break in the middle. So thank you very much to you one and all. I hope to see you all in person in good time. Hopefully out of this isolation. Sick of it already. But we'll leave it at that for the moment and close with a karakia. Kia tauano kia tātou katoa, te ata pai o tō tātou ariki ai Ukraine. Whingātahi ki te wairua tapu.